All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is wonderful to see you all here. We've got a bunch of people on Zoom as well, and we are also recording it. And just so you know, before anybody even asks, we will be sending out an email following today's presentation that will give you a link to the recording. Please feel free to share it with those who weren't able to be here today. And also any follow-up information that Christine and Frank promise you. We will make sure that you get that. I'm Reverend Ellen Jennings. I'm pastor of Cleveland Park Congregational UCC, and we like to say, whoever you are and wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. So I'm glad you're here today. We're really fortunate to have Christine Bitzer, who is Director of Case Management at Seabury Resources for Aging, and Frank Finnemore, who is Director of the Cleveland and Woodley Park Village. And they are going to offer us a presentation on planning for the ages, preparing for older adulthood. They will center their presentation around some scenarios / case studies, because that always makes things a little more interesting. And you will have opportunities to ask questions, get your questions answered. And also, after we finish the presentation and we go into what we call the parlor for coffee and refreshments, you'll be able to talk with them personally if you'd like. And also, we have Beth Boyd here as well from Seabury Resources for Aging. So with that being said, thank you so much, Christine and Frank, for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and I give it over to you.
Thank you. So as Ellen said, my name is Christine Bitzer. I'm the director of Seabury's Care Management Program. Let me know if you can't hear me, because I know I have a soft voice. I did want to just stop and explain a little bit about what care management is, and then turn it over to Frank to talk about what villages are and introduce himself a little further. So I joined the care management team going on 20 years ago. And the reason why I wanted to get into care management is because care management, as opposed to case management, is very much focused on the whole person. So we tend to have smaller caseloads. We tend to be able to follow people across the continuum of care, meaning, for example, if I have a client who is located in DC and lives in DC, but needs to cross the river to Virginia for rehab, or maybe needs to cross the border into Maryland for rehab, or maybe they've decided they're going to move closer to a child who lives in Maryland, I can follow them because I'm not restricted by county rules or city rules or anything like that, or by a funding source. We're paid for privately, although here at Seabury Care Management, we do try to reduce the costs of services when we can. We do specific fundraising for that purpose. The other thing is we tend to have smaller caseloads so that we can really build that relationship with individuals. We have clients who stay with us, just for a brief consultation, maybe a week or a month. And we have other clients who have been with us, going on 10 or 15 years. So it really just depends, but it's really about the whole person, not just the medical piece, but the socialization piece. Who's around to support them? Do they have the legal documents in place? What is the financial situation so that we can make the best recommendations? And then, how does their housing look? Is it a place that can sustain them for the rest of their lives if they want to age in place? So it is really looking at the whole person. Frank?
Great. Hi, I'm Frank Finnemore. I'm the director of the Cleveland and Woodley Park Village. And I want to tell you a little bit about villages in general, because they're a resource to you as you age. Villages started in Boston, in the neighborhood of Boston, when a group of people got together and they were chatting over coffee and said, well, where do you want to go next? Where do you want to age? And they said, well, right here. But that's going to be a little challenging sometimes when someone stops driving, or the house gets to be too much to manage individually. And so they came up with this idea of a nonprofit organization that would offer practical assistance, like drives to medical appointments or social activities or tech support, and other things like deliveries of medication and groceries and such. And so that sort of took off. It became a great model called the Village Movement, and it's since become a little more broad than that, because we realized with some research from the National Institute on Aging that if people want to live a long time and they want to stay independent in their homes, one key ingredient is staying active and engaged. And so the villages sort of changed the model a bit and also came up with a lot of programs that help people to become more socialized and more active in their communities. And you think, well, why is that needed? Well, sometimes people age in place and they're in their house and everyone around them moves. I've seen this many times. And suddenly they don't know their neighbors and they don't have those work colleagues anymore that they used to go to lunch with and chat with and things like that. And so we're feeling a specific need. Luckily in DC, there are 13 villages in the city, with 3 more coming on this year. We hope to eventually have every part of DC covered by a village, which would be really exciting. We're getting there, but we still need to get to a few places like Shaw and Petworth and Columbia Heights, and just to name a few. I like to think of villages as a bridge. Sometimes we help people on that bridge from recent retirement to socialization, and they need to be out and about. Sometimes they're volunteers doing that with us, sometimes they become members. Other bridges are, we provide those sort of services, those practical services. That's where the Village Movement began. We did a lot of grocery deliveries during COVID, right? But we also help people get to medical appointments, help people get to social outings, things that keep them active. Many of those things help people stay exactly where they want to be in their community. May not be in their exact house. Some people move from their house to an apartment, or from a condo to an apartment, and we're still helping them stay within their community as that bridge to the community. And sometimes that bridge lasts until the end. People die at home, other times people can't. Their situation changes, and we're a bridge to the next place. Where that could be memory care, it could be assisted living, it could be out of the area, closer to family members. So we're part of that aging support network, really focused on helping people stay independent as long as they would like, with some practical support and the socialization so that life's fun.
Okay, we're going to get started here if you want to advance the slides. So the first thing I wanted to talk about today was kind of what are the things that you should keep in mind? What should you have on your plate? The first thing and the question that we get, or we actually ask people about, we don't often get the question ourselves, is what about the powers of attorney? Everybody should have a power of attorney. This is actually something that anybody who's over the age of 18 should have a power of attorney. So it's something that starts pretty early, and then you should review it every so often. A good rule of thumb is if you've rolled over into a new decade, you should probably be taking a look. Take a look at all of your planning just to say, is this still what I had in mind? Are the wishes I had when I was 18 what I want when I'm 50? What I want when I'm 70? What I want when I'm 107? So just take a look. One of the things that we talk about a lot is who to choose, because some of us don't have anybody to choose. The most obvious choices for my clients are the children, and often the oldest child, and often the oldest girl. As the oldest child and the oldest girl, I will tell you, and as a care manager, I actually told my parents, no, I'm not the appropriate choice. My brother and sister, there are 4 of us, and my sister is very good at finances. She actually always did like some financial trading, I guess, with my dad. That was sort of their thing they did together. So it was a natural piece for my sister to take on that responsibility. My brother is a nurse anesthetist. So while I sit in the background and say to those 2, did you ask Mom about this? When my dad was alive, did you ask Dad about this? I thought it was better for me to be behind the scenes, kind of reminding them what needed to be asked about. And that was the choice my parents made. They said, yes, I think that's a great choice. So it doesn't have to be your oldest child. So what happens if you don't have children? What happens if you're a solo ager? This is something that has a lot of responsibility attached to it. It is a job that needs to be discussed from both sides. There are individuals you can pay to be your power of attorney. Oftentimes, it's an actual attorney that you can pay. We have seen recently that something called daily money managers will step in and act as a power of attorney for finances. There would be a fee for both of those, but it is possible. Sometimes it's a neighbor or a friend who has stepped up, somebody who's close to you. And I would say, even if you have children, what if your children are out of the area? Should your backup be somebody who's closer, who can work with your child? So these are all things to consider. I'm also happy to tell you that in the almost 20 years I've been at Seabury, we've had a lot less surprises among our clients. When I first started and we reached out to powers of attorney, they sometimes didn't know they were the power of attorney. It's really important to set aside some time to talk to the person that you want to make these decisions for you. The power of attorney will make the decisions that they think are best, and they should be making those decisions based on everything they know about you and all the wishes that you talked about. But if you've never had that conversation, they're probably going to do it based on what they think is best at that moment in time, which oftentimes this comes into play in the middle of a crisis when everybody's just trying to tread water and survive. So it's really important to take some time to say you want to have a serious conversation and to discuss it. And then, again, as the decades roll by, as the years go by, you can kind of rediscuss it. Because what I had in my advance directive saying, do I want everything out there? Do I want CPR done? Do I want to have a feeding tube? All of those things will change as I get older, and as life lays out, what are the diagnoses that are going to hit me and what I'm going to be diagnosed with. Again, I started in this business when I was 24, 25. Very different now from my middle age. And back then, I said to one of my elder law friends who had graduated with me, I was like, what am I supposed to say? Because here I am, like, telling people they need to make these decisions. And my friend Dan looked at me and he's like, you're 25, you want everything done. When you turn 90, we'll have this conversation again and I'll tell you what you want. It's like, okay, so you need to think about that. What you wanted back then may not be what you want now, and what you want next year may be different than what you want now.
Christine, if I could just add a couple of points. One is, it doesn't have to, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be either or, like, who do I choose as a power of attorney? I served as a power of attorney for my aunt, and along with her daughter, my cousin. And she chose both of us, and we had to agree, and if we didn't, her daughter's word, carried. And we never ever disagreed in the 10 years that we supported my aunt through Alzheimer's. But she chose us because we brought very different skill sets. And we work together very effectively. So I would put that out there as a potential model. The, many people don't have children. Right, exactly.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify what you mean by power of attorney. When you started out, I assumed you were talking about financial power of attorney, but then you started to get into medical directives, which is a different kind of power of attorney. Are you talking about two separate documents, one document? Because I'm concerned about who's going to do what, and I don't see those as the same people.
No, and that was the comment that I had made about my two siblings. So when you have the power of attorney, it can be two documents, although usually it's under the durable power of attorney. There is a healthcare section, which is where the advanced directives will be, and that's indicative of, or that includes things about what you want done when you're in a crisis moment or maybe at the end of your life. And then there's the financial piece of it, which is if you are no longer able to pay your own bills or make sense of the finances, then that person would step in and do that. Does that help that? So she said she still wasn't sure if I meant two documents or one document or two people or one people. And the comment from the front came that, that's a question for an elder law attorney. And I would agree. It's going through with an elder law attorney what is the best fit for you. If in your mind the decisions are really best with two different people, then it will be two different documents. Yes, we need some.
Just a quick comment. I was my mother's durable power of attorney for both finances and for healthcare, and there were two separate documents. And part of it was my brother and sister and I, and my mother stipulated that at least one of the two had to agree with me. And my sister and I were lockstep. I had some issues with my brother, but I want to make the point that my mother had a stroke, and she lived for another 6 months. So a medical document is not necessarily just end of life. We were dealing with when she went to she went back to the hospital, and we said at that point she's in hospice, so you don't just get it for end of life.
Oh, no, power of attorney is actually for the living. The power of attorney ends as soon as the person passes away. That's for both the healthcare piece of it, this gentleman also has a question over here, as well as the financial piece of it. And that's also true for guardians and conservators, which is a similar role to a power of attorney, except it's assigned by the court of law. We work with a lot of guardians and conservators, and as soon as that ends, we no longer ask that person to pay our medical or our bills. It goes to the estate. Yes, sir.
My experience is that power of attorney is a very general concept, and the power of attorney document will, I think it must, if it's appropriate, specify exactly what the power of attorney covers. And so you could have a power of attorney for financial things, a different power of attorney for a different person for health things, a power of attorney over a particular piece of property. And you need to, when you get to the power of attorney, have some good advice about how you want to structure the power of attorney concept.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Edmund. And just to clarify, Christine is a case manager, director of case management. Frank is director of Cleveland and Woodley Park Villages. So they are not end-of-life attorneys or estate planning attorneys. So those are important people to consult. They're trying to give you an overview of what the different pieces are.
The other thing that I would add that kind of ties into your point is we we do get asked, we always refer over to elder law attorneys and estate attorneys. I do often get asked, should I just pull something offline and do it? My recommendation would be no. That is certainly your choice. But I know, to your point, each state, particularly in DC, you have to have certain language listed in a power of attorney to make it appropriate for all situations. And that's where it really, you need to check and see, does this one that I just pulled offline pass muster, or should I be going to an elder law attorney? One of the things you also want to have, which we have as a handout here, is the DC MOST form. So the MOST form kind of gets into those healthcare pieces. It needs to be signed by a physician, and that ties into, okay, if a crisis happens, maybe it's the end of life, maybe I'm going to survive beyond this, but what do I want in place? In the district, it's called a MOST form. Nationally, it does have other names. It goes by POLST if you're looking for it to kind of find the information for somebody else in a different area. But that will give the EMTs an idea of what can they do to help you if they're called in a crisis. It's always a good idea, actually, to put that in an envelope that's very clearly labeled. Sometimes you'll see a big red magnet that says File of Life on it, and this is one of the things that should be in the File of Life. Or if you have caregivers who are coming in to assist you, they should know where that document is located if they have to call 911 while they're busy in your home. The other thing that I have to be passed out is from a group of daily money managers, actually, but Kay Bransford put together this collection list. It's an important documents collection list, and it kind of just lays out all the different things that you should know where they're at and where you want what you want other people to know. It is a lot, but it fits in like a 2-inch binder. One of the things that's listed in here that I kind of wanted to point out beside the MOST form, it says driver's license. I have to say it's very important for everybody to have an updated ID of some sort. If you're no longer driving, don't say, I don't need this anymore. I don't drive. Get your ID. I can't tell you how many people we work with who have cognitive issues and can't speak for themselves, but I need their ID to get them some sort of care. And they don't have they don't have an ID that's current, and therefore I have to go searching for their birth certificate and other paperwork to prove who they are, so that they can get something simple like Metro access or other transportation or other benefits. So I would really encourage you to kind of review these lists and make sure that things are up to date. As far as end of life, making sure that you have taken care of your estate plan. Is it a good idea for you to have a trust? What does a trust include? There are various forms of trusts out there. Again, something to talk with an elder law attorney about. Having your will, knowing who's going to manage your estate. The other piece is planning for your funeral and burial. It really takes a big load off of the people you leave behind when you've already made these plans. There are specific regulations that have to be followed when somebody dies, and it just makes it a lot simpler if they can just turn and say, yes, I know that my neighbor, Mrs. Jones, really, she was Jewish and she wants to be She wants her body to be taken care of in this practice, and this is who we're calling, and this is where she's already paid for these services. All of those pieces are very important, and there's a lot of new opportunities out there. I've had people ask about, what if I don't want to be buried with a casket? That's actually possible now in this area. Again, we live in an area that is very blessed with services, so asking what's possible and what's out there. And again, just going back to your personal wishes, making sure that the people who are going to be making some of these decisions for you or are going to help with making these decisions are aware of what your decision would be. Oftentimes when we think about this, we think that we're thinking about people who have cognitive impairment or have some form of dementia. But think about when you've been sick. Think about if you have unfortunately been in the hospital. Are you really with it? Are you really taking in all of the information that the doctor has? Having these conversations ahead of time helps the people who are caring for you know what questions to ask and what information to get and what information to say, you know what, we need a quiet time. We need some time to step back, review what you've told us, and then make this decision, whatever the decision might be. Okay. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just 2 points. One is on the MOST form, we mentioned that you mentioned that it needs to be signed by a physician, and I'm always amazed at the number of folks that don't have a primary care physician, and I know that that's a challenge even in our area. But I really, really highly recommend that you try to find that primary care physician. Recently, I encountered something where somebody didn't have a primary care physician. It was kind of a bad situation. She ended up being in rehab and needed to go to an assisted living center. But because she didn't have her own primary care physician, she had to wait for the rehab physician to do the paperwork. And it was kind of in the rehab's facility's interest in keeping her there for a while, and it wasn't a place that she really wanted to be. But because she didn't have that primary care physician that would do it like that, she was there for several weeks longer. So really, I urge you to make sure that you try to get on that if you don't already have that. The second thing is that it's also really important, particularly for those that are aging, we call them solo agers, that are aging alone, to make sure that you have this information in a place where somebody else can find it. And somebody else knows that if you happen to fall and you go to the hospital, they know where to go and get that. Again, recently, someone else had that situation, had an attorney as her power of attorney, but the attorney didn't know that she had fallen and was in the hospital. And so again, it was more days in order to literally have someone go search her apartment in order to try to unearth those documents. So really take that time, if you can, to make sure that someone else knows where they are and they're very prominent and organized. It really helps you be organized.
Do you have any questions online? Any questions from the community?
You've thrown out a lot of very interesting titles. Say a bit more about the training of an elder care attorney and how he or she works with this assembly of specialists and the kind of lay people involved.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't know that I'm the best person to answer about the elder care attorneys.
Yeah. So there are a group of lawyers that focus typically on elder care. So they know the ins and outs of the powers of attorney, of the estate planning, of the trusts that might be out there to assist individuals. So they're always my first go-to with those folks. There is a National Association of Elder Law Attorneys, NALA, that you can go and search for those. You can also call us and we can let you know like who's in the area or send you the links to those. Sometimes these individuals focus primarily on doing the paperwork and the estate planning alone, and that's it. Others of them do participate with the courts to act as guardians and conservators. And again, just a note, I know we're speaking to mostly a DC crowd here, because we all have states' rights and we live in a 3-state area. If you go over to Maryland or Virginia, a conservator is called a guardian of property, as opposed to a conservator, just FYI. Otherwise, it's the healthcare side is covered by the guardian of person. So there are some who will act as those people. Mostly the individuals who, in my experience, I should say, those elder law attorneys who will act as guardians and conservators for individuals, they're the ones most likely to also act as powers of attorney. The difference, of course, I said this before, but just to reiterate, if you have a power of attorney for healthcare and a power of attorney for finances, you should not need a guardian or a conservator. Guardians and conservators are appointed by the court of law when nobody else has been chosen and it's clear that this person needs someone. A power of attorney, whether it's healthcare or finances, you make that choice, you talk to that person, you decide. So again, this is one of those points where it's you making the decision about what might happen to you as opposed to the court of law making the decision because it's too late and you can no longer do that.
I have an online question. I think the answer is, the question is, you plan to send us the content of things that should be in the Red Book. I believe the answer to that question is we passed it out in person here, and we can add it as an attachment when we send out the follow-up email.
Yes.
Thank you. Your comments raised some questions for me as a resident of the District of Columbia. It's quite likely that if, when I move into an assisted living situation, it would not be in the District of Columbia. Does this mean that you need to secure new IDs with the address if it's Virginia or Maryland? Do your legal documents, your powers of attorney, need to be altered because of the specifics of the state, which may be different from DC? How much changes, basically, if you move from DC to one of our neighboring states?
Mm-hmm. So I would recommend with the ID, definitely, get a new ID in the new jurisdiction that you live in. That's also a good time, as you mentioned, to kind of just review your documents. I can't speak specifically. Typically, a power of attorney should be okay, but I think that's a good time to run it by the elder law attorney and say, do I need anything different now that we've changed? This is just uneducated, but from what I understand, the primary difference in the DC one has to do with real estate. So it may be that you've solved that problem if you've sold your home and moved. However, again, I'm not an elder law attorney. Did that answer that? Okay.
Something to pay attention to.
I will say that we recently had somebody in our congregation who moved from DC to Maryland when she entered a continuing care facility, and it was not a problem at all. I think that the move itself is not, you don't require those things, but as you all were saying, once you have moved, it would be a very good idea to get that new ID, have your documents reviewed. Is that sort of your experience, yeah.
Just as a note about the financial power of attorney, you do need to make, well, for the healthcare power of attorney, make sure all of your doctors and your physicians have a copy of it, and if you ever change it, make sure that the same people you sent it to before have the updated version. The part of the power of attorney or the power of attorney document that deals with your finances, you will need to run those by your financial institution. Just because you've worked with an elder law, even when you've worked with an elder law attorney to fill out your financial power of attorney, they will tell you, they may tell you they want to meet the person, and they will tell you that they want their own forms filled out. It doesn't negate having the general document, but you do need to talk to your financial institutions and see what they want. So unfortunately, it is a lot of paperwork and a lot of questions, to your point. So it does take some time. Okay, so the next slide, we just kind of wanted to give you, as we move into our scenarios, give you some statistics to kind of think about. We wanted to let you know, what I hear frequently is, I want to age in place. And the statistics point that out as well. 75% of people want to age in their own home. As a care manager, sometimes when somebody says that to me, I'm not sure if it's going to be forever. But if we can make it work for a year, if we can make it work for 2 years, if we can make it work for 5 years, and if the person can make an informed decision, make it their choice, their power for when to move, that for me is a good goal. But I will support you and try to keep you there as long as possible. So we all say that we want to move, and yet so many of us, a third of us, are going to need some sort of assistance. Whether you need a walker, whether you need a wheelchair. I often joke in my presentations that, I'm going to be just like this when I am 90 years old, and yet I already have hip problems. So is that really realistic? I don't know, but I'm not going to be in the wheelchair. So it's taking kind of a look at, okay, is it possible for me? And what would happen if I needed a wheelchair? Could I stay in this place? I live in a townhouse, so if I needed a wheelchair, that's not the place for me to be. I can barely take my coat off in my townhouse and hang it up on a coat rack. So these are the things you kind of have to think about in your mind. We're also being cared for by people who are over 65 and may have their own issues. So we wanted to do just a brief, like 2 to 3 minutes, to talk with your neighbor if you are interested, and just say, do you have a plan? If you're online, you can say, yes, I have a plan, or maybe not comment if you don't want to, it's fine, but we thought this would be a moment to kind of see who might have a plan. I will tell you quite honestly, I have a plan that needs to be readdressed.
Those of you online are welcome to put your comments in the chat about whether you have a plan and what your plan is. If you're online, you could just use the thumbs up or thumbs down emoji to let us know whether you have a plan. It's a little survey.
So let's just debrief a little bit. Sorry, we know this was short, but how many folks had a plan? Yeah? Some of you are holding them up high, some are like this. I'm like this. I thought, oh, I haven't changed that plan. The thinking plan, okay. Well, great. Let's go to our scenario, and we're going to look at a couple of, 3 people, and we're going to look at their plans. So the first one is Ms. Ellis, and she wants to stay in her home. She has put things in order. She has a power of attorney, and she even joined the village. She signed up for Senior Med Express to help with some other transportation needs, and she talked to her neighbor, who is her power of attorney. But she knows that she's going to need some additional help in the house. Right now, she has someone who comes in and helps her clean and do the laundry, but she really doesn't want anyone there more than that. She really wants her privacy. She's not interested in hiring anybody, and she thinks that she's going to be just fine. She stays in her home for a couple of years, and it's working out okay, and then there are some cognitive changes, and it becomes much more than the power of attorney ever thought that she was going to be dealing with and helping her neighbor, and she's afraid that the situation has become unsafe for Ms. Ellis to stay. She's forgetting to turn off the stove, and there are some other incidences in the home that make her believe that it's not the appropriate place for her anymore. And her power of attorney places her in memory care, which is nearby. She can go visit her, and she lives out her days there in memory care. How was her plan? Do you think her wishes were followed? Yeah, for a long time, right? For at least a couple of years, it worked out. As Christine said, sometimes people want to stay in their homes, and the care manager will try to make that happen for some period of time. But in this case, the power of attorney also tried to do that. And so I would say that in large measure, her plan was in effect for a long time. And what about who had control in this? Who do you think ultimately had control in this situation? What's that? The neighbor. The power of attorney neighbor. Yes, ultimately. But Ms. Ellis had some too, right? She put the plan in place. Okay, let's go to this next one.
Okay, scenario 2, Mr. Jones. So Mr. Jones, he's a solo ager. He too wants to stay in his home. He's kind of stuck figuring out what his plan is going to be. So for now, he simply says, well, I hope I just pass away in my sleep, and it'll all be taken care of. I hear that quite a lot. I heard that from my father-in-law. He's going to fall asleep on his boat and die. He accepts city-provided meals and meal delivery. He does have a medical alert system, but that's as far as he's gone. Unfortunately, he ends up tripping, and he can't get up from the floor. He does have that medical alert, so he calls for help. They can't get in because nobody else has a key to his apartment, so they do end up having to break down the door. They take him to a hospital where he is transferred to a rehab facility. And it's at that point that he realizes that he really can't just die in his sleep and stay in his apartment. He can afford assisted living, so he has moved to an assisted living, but it's probably not the one he would have chosen if he had taken the time to choose one. It's the one that's close by and has availability right then. So, how about his wishes? Yeah, not really. Not so good. Yeah, he ended up ceding over, I would say he ended up ceding over a lot of the power to whatever happened to him.
And one of the questions that we often get is, what happens to all my stuff? What do I do with all this stuff that I've accumulated over the decades? What do you think happened to Mr. Jones's stuff? Yeah, someone else went through it. He was already into the next place. He didn't have any control over that. The final one, and these are all real, by the way. These are real people that we've worked with. Ms. Smith lived in a great apartment for 25 years. She just loved it there, but for a variety of reasons, it wasn't working for her anymore. The bathroom was too small. She couldn't get a walker that she now needed into the bathroom and additional handrails. But luckily, she found another apartment nearby that was affordable. She met with her financial planner, and they decided that she could do this, what she thought was an upgrade, still a one-bedroom, but the space was bigger, and so it was able to accommodate her walker, which she then needed. She worked with her niece, who put her affairs in order, got her documents in order, and they also hired a care manager to look at the long-term situation and to try to find some assisted living communities in the area that might be appropriate if she was no longer able to live independently. And unfortunately, she did fall and she broke a hip. She survived that, went through rehab, but during that process of rehab, realized that it wasn't a good idea to continue to live independently. She was fearful of that. And so, because they had already worked with a care manager, they had identified several different places that were out of the city, but closer to her niece, that were more affordable, but would meet her needs, and her niece could come and see her on a more regular basis. And so they looked at the options of those two places, and one had availability, and so she ended up moving in there.
I have a question from online, and I think you may have answered it just now, but I'll ask it anyway. So going back to the gentleman, Mr. Jones, the person said, even if he had chosen one, wouldn't it have depended on whether there was availability? It sounds like you're saying you have to move to assisted living before you need it so that you can have it available when you do. And I think you just addressed that, but maybe just say a little bit more.
Well, I personally think it's always good to visit a number of places, and we take people, villages and others, you can go in anytime, but we do a group tour of various places so that people can get an idea. So many times you can choose something and then you can choose a place and you are on their wait list. And then you can choose at that point whether or not, if something comes available, if you want to take it at that point, or they usually give you many times that you can say, no, I'm not ready yet, I'm not ready yet, and choose. My point is that even if, in Mr. Ellis's case, if he's starting with a basis of knowledge, he's in a crisis and he needs to go somewhere, so you are looking for availability, but at least he's got a plan, so he may go somewhere else temporarily and then move. You can do that, you can transfer. But he has an idea, ahead of time of where he's going to go.
Yeah, and there is more availability in the assisted livings. Everything, especially right now, there's so many communities going up, so many people want to make deals with you so that you would move in. But when you need it in that moment of crisis, your options are just going to be limited because of time and because of ability to get the transition done. If you need something special, for example, in the district, we now have, I think it's 5 larger assisted living communities that will take the Medicaid waiver. So Medicaid will pay for the care that happens in those places. Some of them are in Northwest and Northeast, and some of them are in Southwest. However, helping somebody through that process right now, getting them assessed, getting them in, it's taking so much time that if this client of mine were in a crisis, she wouldn't have that choice. She would be going to the first place that accepted her. But we do have a little bit of time, so we're able to do that. In a case like Mr. Ellis's, he would not. And again, that's talking about assisted living. If somebody needs an even higher level of care, so long-term care in a nursing home. Again, a nursing home often has two sides to it. One is a rehab side where you go, if let's say you fall and you break your hip and you need a little bit of rehab, that's paid for by Medicare on that side. They also have a long-term care side, which is what we typically think of for nursing home. And oftentimes Medicaid long-term care, after you spend down, becomes the payer source for that. There frequently are not beds available where you want them to be. So for example, if I have somebody in Northwest who's used to going to Sibley, they love the Renaissance, they've been there before for rehab, they want to be there for long-term care, they probably don't have a Medicaid long-term care bed. If I want to get them into the Lisner. Now again, if you don't need a Medicaid bed because you have the money to pay for it, but this is the most expensive thing out there, that's not an issue, but most people need to be planning for the Medicaid portion. Yes.
So what if Mr. Ellis, the gentleman whose scenario you presented, you said that fortunately he could afford, long-term care or, assisted living. What if he had been in an emergency situation and could not afford assisted living?
He would have transferred over to the long-term care Medicaid side, and that's where he would have stayed.
Okay, so he would just have had, there is, I guess what I'm hearing is there is always a space, so to speak, for somebody who can't afford anything, but you have no choice.
Right. Yeah, and oftentimes when somebody goes into rehab in a crisis situation, the nursing home is trying to discern, are they going to need to be here long-term, or are they just going to stay short-term? Where we often find the concern happening is if somebody who lives in the district ends up in Maryland for rehab, a lot of places don't take DC Medicaid. And so there will be that kind of, well, they have to go back home then. So it becomes this kind of push-pull, because on my end, I need my clients to go to someplace safe. And if home is no longer safe for them, then what are the options? And in that case, it might be a transfer to a bed that will accept them no matter where it is. Okay. All right, so next slide, I think.
Yeah, so we want to just quickly debrief, what did we learn from this? And the first question we have is, who do you think had the most control over what happened to them and their belongings of the scenarios provided? Any thoughts? The third one, right? Ms. Ellis? She did the advanced planning, she worked with somebody, her niece, they had worked with a care manager. She really put it in place so that when things did happen that she had to respond to, she had a plan to respond. And some of the resources that were available to these folks, I'm just curious what you gleaned. Who helped them? Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So the people that operated the facilities helped them. The other folks. There were also the care manager. Some of them had villages, of course. The power of attorneys, whether those who were family or neighbors. There was even some caretakers in the home in some instances, some aides, hard to come by these days, but they are there. Any question in the back?
How does that work with care managers? Are they independent contractors or are they associated with facilities?
No, they aren't associated with facilities. Actually, that's one of the things that care managers really strive to be objective. Our client is the older adult, and we always make recommendations. We do not make decisions, and they're based on the older adult. A lot of care managers are members of what's called the Aging Life Care Association, or ALCA. You can go to aginglifecare.org, and I believe this is somewhere in the slides, but we'll make sure it goes out to everybody. You can search for care managers who are in your area or near the person in question across the nation. Most care managers are social workers or nurses, but oftentimes there may also be things like speech-language pathologists. There may be PTs or OTs or physical therapists or occupational therapists, or gerontologists who have come into this field after working for some time in their own fields. But again, that's what we do. That's what we do in Seabury Care Management. Oftentimes they're solo practitioners out in the area. Other times there are some larger groups like Seabury, or Aging Well, or Aging Network Services. Iona has a small program now. Typically they are for-profit entities. In this area, we've been privileged to have some nonprofits like Seabury Care Management, and again, Iona Jessa has a small one still, but that one is just for their Holocaust survivors at this point. So hopefully that answers your question, but there's more questions. We have two up front.
Okay, please say more about handling possessions. I have easily 2,000 or 3,000 books. Furniture, but I'm really concerned about where these things go. Solo.
Yeah, so there are a couple of resources. One is the village has volunteers that can come and help sort for members and help to donate those. There are also organizers, professional organizers, that can come and help you, that are affiliated sometimes with other places like auction houses or like the used bookstore, Second Story Books. They know where you can, if you're interested in donating them or selling them, how to do that. Those are some of the tools that come to mind. Oh, if you're no longer alive. Well, whomever your executor is going to have to deal with that. And oftentimes they're boxed up, and sometimes it's whatever is easiest in terms of donating them. They're not going to be. I don't know what happens if there's no executor. The state comes in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure most of the time it would just probably get trashed, although there's other people. Whoop, Judy will tell us. If I was an apartment cleaner, I've seen apartments just get cleaned out and gone into the trash.
That's true. If it's left only to a facility and they don't know what to do. However, anyone in the hauling, even a hauler, these days will not trash anything they don't have to. So they're going pretty much modern, even just the guy with the truck or the crew with the truck is going to just look at it, and they know from experience, donate this, donate that, donate this, donate that. nobody really wants to landfill anything anymore if they can manage not to.
Right.
Judy is a professional organizer with just that simple. That's why we were looking to her
At her.
for her expertise. So thank you, Judy.
I think one thing we can take away from this is to decide not to be too stubborn or too rigid. The first case study, the woman said she absolutely would not put up with somebody sleeping in her house. I guess that's the way she looked at it.
Yep.
We had a next door neighbor like that who would not tolerate any, except maybe a cleaning person coming in a few hours a week, would not tolerate any person coming and even staying overnight occasionally. And so what happened is ultimately she just had to go to a nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how much better would it have been if she had been able to compromise on that wish?
But on the flip side, I want to say I have had somebody who said, I had a conversation with her, and I'm just relating this because I think it applies. And she said, I really want to stay right where I am. I don't want people in my house. And I said to her, but you also don't have a medical alert device or anything. If you fall, you might be there for a few days. And she said, well, if I get to live in my house for a few more years before that happens, then I probably won't mind those few days. And that was her decision to make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was hard for me to hear, but it was her decision to make. We should probably move to the next slide of what's keeping you from making your plans. And I'm just curious if maybe you can just chat with each other, and some of these may be the reason, but there may be other reasons. And just curious if you could just chat with each other and see if there's anything that comes to mind that keeps you from making your plans.
1 minute. It's coming.
Okay, we have somebody willing to share something in the back. There we go.
I'd rather go to the dentist without anesthesia.
Yeah.
One of the folks online says time and knowing the options, which is what she's here to learn. She also did ask if there are au pairs for the elderly.
I don't think they're called that, but
Yeah, they don't call them that. There are certainly home aides that exist, both as private individuals as well as agencies that support them. And we're going to get into that in the next slide and tell you a little bit about the cost of some of these supports. But really, all of these things, are important to look at, and including, which I would put in here, I'll get around to that later. I'm still feeling like, that's something I still have time to do. But we all have our own. And what's important is to look at it and see, when are we ready?
And I know there are some groups that do kind of get together to make these plans, which is always, I think that's something, I still have small kids. So my kind of hesitance in doing this is I still have small kids. So when they're in high school, I feel like I would want to join a group that every week I have another assignment, or every month. I think it's every month there's a new assignment. Like, have you thought about your powers of attorney? Have you had the conversation? Have you looked at your will this month? Which is always good. Although my elder law attorney, the gentleman that I spoke with, he did grab me last time I was down at my parents' house and said, you need to talk to me, so let's come in and review it. So we did. We let the boys play on their machines while my husband and I sat down for an hour. We didn't do everything, but at least we have both children in there now, so that's good. So the next slide, and I apologize in advance for this one. I know the closed captioning is going to go over it. But so if you want to age in place.
Top says age in place, what's available.
Yep. As I mentioned earlier, living in this area, we are really blessed with the breadth of resources that are available. It is true that many of them cost money. The district also has a lot of services to offer individuals. My parents don't live that, or my mom doesn't live that far away. She's just in Hampton Roads. But the services that are down there versus up here, and in Virginia, you know, it's Northern Virginia and it's Hampton Roads, and yet the difference between the two and what they have to offer is huge. Around here, you have lots of villages. Frank talked about the villages earlier. There's also senior centers and meal sites where you can get a free meal, have an education session. Those are put on in the district through the Department of Aging and Community Living. I like to call it DACL. So you can definitely look at that, as well as some, you know, engagement activities. For example, over at St. Albans, there's another group there. Transportation, I always tell people, even if you don't think you're going to use Metro Access, you know you're not going to use it. It is often the thing that opens up the door to other programs. So I would look into, do I need Metro Access? Can I get approved for it so that then I can use some of these other services? Of course, many of my clients now know how to use things like Uber and Lyft, or can at least sort through it, which is helpful. We talked about a daily money manager. These are people who are fiduciaries. They're oftentimes CPAs. They can help you kind of budget. They may be the person that you meet with on a weekly or a monthly basis who helps to pay your bills. They're not your, as I said, some of them will act as a financial power of attorney, but it might be just, you know, I need somebody to double check me, and I'm a solo ager. Can you come and double check me and make sure that people are getting paid on time and I'm not receiving late fees? Of course, home delivered meals can be through the city. They can also, you can order those online as well. There are some options for that. One of the things about home modifications, I talked earlier about how, you know, if anything happens to me where my mobility is impaired, I don't have a lot of options. Sure, I can put a chairlift in place, but you walk in the front door and you have to go upstairs or you have to go downstairs, and that's typical in DC. Things like home modifications really do not end up well if you're planning in the middle of the crisis. If you're in the hospital or you've moved over to rehab and it's time for you to go home and your home is inaccessible, well, now your option is not about the home modifications, but it's whether or not your dining room is just going to become your bedroom. And it'll have to have a commode because you just have a powder room on the first floor. You don't have a full bath. So that home modification, even if you have the funds for it, it's not something that's going to happen like that. It needs to take some planning. So it's better to plan that ahead of time instead of on the back end where you might have to move into an assisted living for respite stay while it gets done. If you don't know what a respite stay is, the assisted livings in the area will often let you move into their community for a short period of time. Usually it's at least 30 days because you have to go through the entire process, you know, getting the physician form done, getting the finances looked at. So it has to be for 30 days, but you can continue it longer if you need it. They like to do that because it's a good opportunity for them to sell themselves to you, not just the one-time lunch when you come in for a tour, but okay, this is what it would be like if I lived here. So they're hoping that you won't go back home, but it is a possibility. We've had several clients who end up going there because they can get, in my mind, they kind of get better PT. They still get the Medicare PT, but the physical therapy group is in the building. They have a gym that they can go to, so it's not just, using what's in the home as a weight or as a stairs. It's actually using the same equipment you would use in the rehab facility or similar equipment. Nowadays, the physicians are getting out their little black bags and they're coming to visit you, which is great. Almost anything, I have clients who frequently have urinary tract infections. I don't want to take them out in this weather, but we can get that test done in the home. We can get some lab work done in the home. A lot of this was really on fast forward with COVID because nobody could go out of their homes, but the nurses would come in and get the lab work done. So that was one of the silver linings to COVID. We also have some good practices that do accept Medicare and sometimes even Medicaid to come into the homes. So that's something good to talk about. Home healthcare aides who do take care of assisting people with their activities of daily living, so things like bathing and dressing. Nowadays, that typically costs about $36 an hour. They typically ask for a 4-hour minimum. Sometimes they want it twice a week, 4 hours each time. The question that I get asked a lot is, what am I going to do with this person in my house for 4 hours? 4 hours is an interminably long time. You know what? A load of laundry takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So there you have half of the time done already. If you need assistance with bathing, sometimes that can take a very long time as well. So the time goes by a lot faster, but they can be used for things like to help accompany you to a medical appointment. They can be used to ask them to make some basic meals for you. Tell the company or the person when you interview them, I need somebody who can cook. And these are the types of things that I like to have cooked for me. Or are there casseroles that you can make ahead of time so that the 2 days that you're not here or the 4 days that you're not here, I can just get them out of the freezer myself. So be creative in the thinking. Adult daycare tends to be for individuals with cognitive issues. It falls into things like medical, where they're going to want to provide where they could provide medications to the individual. Also just assistance with toileting and things like that. So those are what the adult daycares are going to be looking at. But this is a community of individuals where the activities are made specifically for people who have cognitive issues to try and keep them as alert and oriented and engaged as possible for as long as possible. There are also some great groups. I see Honora over here, previously with Sibley Senior Association and Club Memory. Club Memory is wonderful because it provides the care partner as well as the care receiver just an outlet, a place to engage with people. It also has this very innovative, I think, way of acknowledging the person with the cognitive issues and having a group just for them. So those people who are in the early stages of dementia who can still get something out of a group can participate in a therapeutic group while their care partner is participating and on through the different stages. And of course, care management is somewhere between $170 and $210 an hour.
Let me just say, all of these resources are available on our website for free for anyone. We really want to get that word out. It's the address is on, the URL is there, cwpv.org/resources. And we've organized it to be based on what you're searching for. So for example, if you're looking for in-home support, it's there, and it comes up with all these different categories. The Aging Life Care Management Association is there, for example, and you can put in the zip code and then find a care manager, across the country if you're helping a friend or something. So it's really a great resource. It's pretty Ward 3 specific, or centric, I should say, but it's not exclusive, but that's really where we centered it. So I invite you to look at that and hope it's helpful. And if you have additions, it's really a living document, so please let us know what you'd like to have added that isn't there, or if there's things that have changed. So, like, for example, money managers are there. There's a whole list of them, and also the National Association for Money Managers, so you can find others too.
I heard a little gasp when you told how much it costs per hour for a care manager. So maybe just explaining a little bit more. I mean, a care manager is obviously not an in-home aide that you're going to use for hours and hours at a time. So maybe just some information about what that includes.
Right, so a care manager is what I explained at the beginning that Seabury Care Management does. We're not here to do hands-on service. Our role is to understand, again, every piece of the individual and then help put that plan into place. But it might be myself or another care manager who's kind of going through and saying, okay, this is how we advocate for this type of service, or this is how we connect to this type of service, and this adds to your plan. Your goal is to age in place. Here are the steps to do that. And then that continued day to day as things come up. We've said here, there's a lot of planning that can be done, and a care manager helps with that. I would say we tend to get more of the calls when something has happened. And then it's like, okay, how do we stabilize that situation and then move forward from there? So it's understanding what the needs of the person are, what they have in place, where the gaps are, and then really putting those pieces into place.
And I'm not sure about Seabury, I should know this, but many of the care managers actually have a plan where they get to know you and what your needs are, and they help you develop the plan. And then you pay an upfront fee, $800 to $1,000 or something like that, and then they just check in with you every quarter or so, or every couple of months, and you don't pay for that. But then if you do need their assistance because you have fallen and you're in rehab and you're trying to figure out what's next and you're putting that plan into action, then they already know you. It's kind of like taking your car to the same shop, right? They know what they're dealing with, and it's a sort of added bonus to get them involved earlier than later when you're in the midst of a crisis.
All right, and Seabury has something similar to that, but most of our clients actually end up needing us on a regular basis more frequently. So while we do have that, we tend to see more of the people in the other situation. So I think we need to close up, but I did just want to make sure that you understand the last slide, which is the housing pieces. One of the things that I hear frequently is, well, I don't want to go to a nursing home. And when I delve into that deeper, people are confusing a nursing home, which is the highest level of care, with every other place that's listed on here. So, an independent living that's in a senior living community, or an assisted living or a memory care, those are not nursing homes. If you're in an assisted living, you don't need 24-hour care, but they do have somebody there in case you need something. And I indicated, again, you'll get the copy of this, but I've indicated kind of what would be the payer source for it. Most often it is self-pay or long-term care insurance. Something we didn't talk about, but you should always make sure you understand your long-term care insurance, because it may be different than you thought it was. I recently had a client who, her long-term care insurance doesn't pay for assisted living. It pays for a nursing home and it pays for in-home care. So I will never be recommending that she go to an assisted living. So it just depends. I think there was a question.
Good question here.
Well, not really a question, but I'm just wondering, you said that as if everybody here has this insurance. And I'm kind of like, really? Okay.
No, most people don't have long-term care insurance. Long-term care insurance would pay for things like assisted living or home health care to come in to your home. Because remember, Medicare and Medicaid are health insurances. They typically do not pay for a caregiver to come into your home long-term. It is something like long-term care insurance, which unfortunately some of the costs have just blossomed in the past year, so a lot of people have ended up dropping their long-term care. Yes, I'm being polite with my terms, blossomed.
It kicks in, your long-term care insurance kicks in when you need assistance with generally 2 activities of daily living. So meal prep or bathing or getting dressed, things like that. And there are options in most policies if you're not going to assisted living, but you need help or you want help at the home, that they will pay a reduced amount per day up to some maximums.
There's another question out there. The mic is coming. I know we're right at the end of our time, so.
I'm missing one important bit of information. I hope to come away today with some guidance on how to start clearing out an attic and a basement that are total disasters. How to go about doing it, where to contact, who to contact, how to get motivated. I mean, I need resources of where to go.
I mean, I would talk with a professional organizer about how to clean out and just kind of start that process. A lot of the professional organizers that we work with and we know, they actually spend time. We did have some of our life enrichment also help out with this a lot, because oftentimes it's also about telling the story of it to let the item go. And I'm sure Judy could talk to you afterwards about that as well. But sometimes it's just easier as long as you know that the story has been captured, and then you can turn it over. Sometimes it's about knowing that it's going to go. There was another question, you had a question about, what do I do with these books? Well, what in your mind would you like to see have that happen to them? Do you want them to be donated? And if you want them to be donated, what's the goal behind that? And these are things you can talk about with a professional organizer. Sometimes, again, a care manager might be the person who's starting that conversation to say, well, tell me what the goal is, and then I can help point you to the right place. Sometimes it's starting your own group.
And sometimes the villages can help. Our volunteers can be an extra pair of hands to take that, those 10 boxes of books to the library to donate or wherever you're going. We're not professionals, but we're there to help. So it depends on the level of support that you need. But I'd also invite you to look at the website specifically. I haven't memorized what we have there for organizing, but I know that we do have some. Yeah, so it's cwpv.org/resources, and there should be some resources there already, but there may be others. And maybe last.
Well, I have an online question and comment. We have a question over here and a question here, and then maybe we'll wrap.
Yep.
So the online comment is, my mom, who lived to 101, had long-term care insurance, but it paid only for in-facility care. She had 2 health aides and was turned down for reimbursement. Her long-term care insurance delivered nothing for her or my father. Need to be careful about what you sign up for. Somebody else said, feeling totally depressed, but clearly in a motivated way. And then finally, just wanting to confirm that the slides, which are very helpful, will be part of what we send out. Yes,
Absolutely.
okay. So there's a question over here, and then Mindy has a question.
I was just going to make one comment about things that people own, in addition to organizing services and clear out services and whatnot. I would imagine that you have the option also to think ahead as to whether you want an assets disposition list in your estate papers. There could be things that you want to designate exactly where they're going. So unless you leave it all to a professional to help you with, but you might have a few things you wanted to list.
Great.
Okay, please say a little bit more about independent living as opposed to not only assisted living, but living by yourself. That's certainly independent, but independent living means some facility in which you live in independent living. Please explain.
Yeah, so if you live independently, you live in your own residence, whether the apartment, condo, house, what have you. But then there are places where, in this area, I can name a few. Ingleside has an independent living facility. There's a new one that's up associated with the Lisner home, the Louise, where there are individual.
No, Sunrise.
Sunrise isn't.
Independent living in Bethesda.
But not at
Oh, not
Connecticut,
these, okay.
Sorry. Yeah. So those would be where you would have your own apartment, and sometimes those are places where you buy in, and like Ingleside, and you pay an amount based upon how much your state is going to get back after you pass. Others are clearly rentals. So you pay a per monthly fee, just like you were to go and rent an apartment down the street. Those would be both different types of independent living.
Would an independent living facility have?
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're expected in an independent living.
Repeat her question, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so the question is, basically, what's the difference between independent living in your own condo or your own apartment and independent living in a senior living community? In a senior living community, you usually have access to meals or a dining room. Oftentimes it's a part of your rent, although sometimes you can pay a la carte as well, especially if you have neighbors, et cetera. On that point, if they have space, they may also offer, for example, if you have out-of-state children who come and in your own apartment, they would have stayed with you in the second bedroom. If your independent living community has some empty room, they might be able to rent that. There will be activities on site, trips and things that you can just walk out your door and downstairs and there it is. They sometimes will have particularly at like the Louise, which is for low to moderate income individuals, they'll have a support services coordinator that might be able to link you up with some city services. It does not typically include, though, somebody coming into your home. The caregivers there will be a nurse on hand, and sometimes you can access medication management for an extra fee. But typically the caregivers, the certified nursing assistants who are there, who would take care of things like bathing and dressing, you cannot access the ones that work at the senior living community. That would be for if you transition into an assisted living mode. There are places, for example, the newer community, Inspire, every single apartment there is set up to be assisted living, because when you have assisted living, it's also about the regulations of the area. So, for example, I'm not sure how it is at the Sunrise of Bethesda, but the Sunrise in Montgomery Village also has a small independent living. If somebody needed assisted living, they would have to move out of that apartment and into the apartments that are labeled assisted living. Whereas at Inspire, you just stay there in the same apartment and people would come in. Often an assisted living apartment does not have a stove and a kitchen, whereas an independent living place would, so you have the option. Even in a place like Ingleside, you have the right to bring your own caregivers in. So if you need help, you don't have to move over. although that you do have to read your contracts because their contracts are getting stronger to force you to move over to the assisted living when they think you need it. But you do have the right to bring services into your own home, just like you would if you remained in the community. So hopefully.
Is it fair to say, Christine, that, so those are continuing care communities?
Not all of them.
No. Okay, but if somebody chooses a continuing care community, oftentimes it is because they want that sort of comfort of already knowing that community as an independent living resident when and if they need to move into the assisted living part of that community.
Right. Most people do buy in. There's always a buy-in when you're in a continuing care retirement community. And most people do move in with the intent to move over to assisted living. I will tell you, in reality, most people don't want to move from the independent living to the assisted living. And sometimes that's because when they moved in, everything was great, and now that it's time to move over to assisted living, maybe the assisted living's having some problems and they don't want to move. Sometimes it's just, that's where the old people are. So, you know, you do really have to think carefully about and make sure you're visiting all sections, not just the pretty sections, and talking to the people who live there.
And just two quick last points on that. One is you also want to think about if you're choosing something that isn't a full, continuing care retirement community, what happens if you spend all of your resources? That's a really key question to ask, because in some cases you have to go.
Yeah.
In other cases, you're moving to a different part of that facility that's Medicaid beds, but they look very different. In other cases, you stay in the same room and Medicaid pays. So these are important things. The last thing I want to say is we could spend 2 hours just on this topic, but there are some free resources out there. Some organizations, for-profit organization, for example, that does some free seminars on understanding these. And I really encourage you to look at those. They're on Zoom and in person as well, because this is a rich topic and it's part of planning.
So I just want to thank both of you so much. I mean, obviously, we spent just, an hour and 35 minutes, covered a lot of territory. Clearly, there is so much more. We promise you that you will get an email with all of the slides, any of the handouts that were passed out here today, and contact information for both Christine and Frank. And, hopefully it was useful to you in terms of, at least for some of you, maybe like a little bit of a cattle prod. And for others of you, just, providing you with access to resources that you really do need in order to move ahead. But thank you so much for coming today. Thank you so much to Christine and Frank, whom we'll clap for in a moment. And I really encourage you to come into our parlor and have some cake and coffee. Thank you.